How do you get to the peak of prosperity after you've buried your daughter? In my situation, but whatever you're dealing with, the struggles that you're having, my brother, the peak of prosperity, do you feel that is it even possible for you when you look at your body or your being or your balance and your relationships or your business? Is there a possibility of peak of prosperity, not living in the peak of poverty? And then the second thing we're going to talk about is step two of my book. Don't neglect people. Okay, welcome here to day 1044 of my journey. And we're going to be talking about, in the Warrior's Way, the peak of prosperity. But before we do, I want to jump into my book, The Ascension of the Warrior. The Ascension of the Warrior by the Master Craftsman is designed because our life is designed by the Master himself. But what is step two in my book? Step two in my book is don't neglect people. This is a really hard one because there's people that get on our nerves. There's people that we don't like. There's people that we just don't want to talk to. There's people that, because we live in that pit of poverty, last thing we want to do is talk to somebody who is just exuding positivity when we feel so much like a piece of crap. But neglecting people is exactly what we should not do, but it is what we do every day. We don't look for opportunities within other people. I've talked about proximity. Our proximity to the people that are around us are a direct result of our ability to be able to get to the peak of prosperity. You know, there's a saying, take the average five people that you hang around with, and it'll equal your income. But that also goes to your attitude and so many other things about your life. When we live in that pit of poverty, suffering the grief, suffering loss, and everything, just in my situation of burying my daughter, and we live in that dark, dark place where very rarely do we ever see any light in our day. That pit of poverty can keep us stuck. And we will ignore the people that are sometimes the closest to us, such as our wife, our children, our people in our business, our employers, our employees, or whoever we have. And then when we go out into the public's eye, we ignore those people. You know, if somebody was lying there bleeding to death, would you even bend down to get involved? And a lot of times we just say, I'm not getting in the middle of that. I don't want to get involved. You know, we see this all the time. Social media, people record this. There's somebody laying there in pain, bleeding, and the people record it because they want to get it out there because, hey, this might make me go viral or whatever the case is. This is how we do life. And that is doing life surviving, thinking about yourself. By not neglecting people, we're taking our focus off our pain and our suffering, and we're focusing on other people. You know, when you really think about it, no matter what you're dealing with, there's somebody out there that's probably got it 10 times worse than you do. Yeah, I know for myself, I buried my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter. And, you know, regardless of the age of your child, it's just an unnatural act. It's something that's not supposed to happen. So, you know, how do you find any good in anything throughout the day? You have these little peaks, but it's you don't feel like you're in the peak of prosperity. That is the target, the goal. We have a process through living by the code and living by the warrior's way. We can take somebody from the pit of poverty, from the pit of where their darkest, darkest moments in their life. And we can begin to change the way we live our life by setting priorities and looking at our body and our being and our balance and our business. And we can make drastic changes in certain areas, but it's one step at a time because it starts in step one in my book. What is God saying to you? And it starts with the code. What are the facts? What's the truth? Not the lies that we tell ourselves. Because I've said this before, if I was to ask you, how are you doing today? You would probably say, oh, I'm doing fine, or doing just as well as to be expected, which is all a lie. Because I know deep down, because I can see you right now and I know you're hurting. If you're watching this podcast, I know you're hurting. This podcast goes out to 50,000 fathers that are struggling with loss, grief, or some type of trauma in their life. They're not able to lead themselves, so they can't lead their wife and they can't lead their family, that is. And so from that standpoint, it just creates havoc and destruction and chaos in their life. And the longer that we stay away and we lie about it, the worse it gets. The bigger the pit gets around us, and the harder it is. And the gap between the pit and the peak gets wider and wider and wider. And we just don't see a pathway there. It took me 32 years to find this pathway, and I'm on day 1044 of this journey when I finally asked God, "What are you saying to me?" When I look at the whole entire journey, it's something like 11,500 plus odd days from the time that I got the actual call when God said, "Hey, when something happened to my daughter," and I didn't turn and I didn't grab and I didn't save myself first. I tried to turn around and save other people, and ignored myself. So by ignoring ourselves, we wind up also ignoring other people and neglecting them. So, because we can't deal with ourselves. So, if this really resonates with you and this message really speaking to you, then I would really hope that you would click the link in the description of this podcast and pick up my book, The Ascension of the Warrior. I cover the cost of the book. You can go to Amazon and get it for $19.95, but I cover the cost of that $19.95 for you, and you just have to pay the shipping, which is like $8 or $9. And in that, there's 8 steps. There's practical steps. There's Bible verses that take you through each and every chapter. It gets you into the conversation with God so you can start hearing what God's saying to you. And it starts showing you some of the framework about the code and the body, the being, the balance, and business to be able to apply some of these questions. But you get them more in depth to begin to learn the warrior's way, where, we have a Bible study. You can click the link in here also and join the Bible study. But there's opportunities for you to have closer proximity to me where we can go ahead and go deeper into the warrior's way. I'm giving you the tools or the cheat code in the warrior's way as far as what are the key points of the warrior's way. But there's so many tools that go along with this. You know, when I was involved in grief groups and all these things, they didn't give me tools. They didn't give me resources. They gave me a 6 to 8 week program and they sent me out the door. They kind of did like a graduation. And this is something that doesn't go away, my brother. I know. I've lived it and I am living it. I live it every day. But because there's a brotherhood that understands you, we don't have to live in silence anymore. So stop living in silence. Start telling the truth. Get raw with the feelings and emotions. Let's get relevant and let's start producing fruit in our life so we can reach the peak of prosperity. See you next time. Love you guys. God loves you. Later.